The greatest trick the devil ever pulled was convincing the world he didn't exist. And recently on AEW Dynamite, MJF proved that to be true as he turned heel for the first time in nearly a year, beating down Daniel Garcia and Daddy Magic into a bloody pulp and proving once again that he is indeed the biggest scumbag in all of professional wrestling. And the beatdown that we saw on Dynamite this past week was not just one of, well, I'm doing this in order to get to a certain place. This was a beatdown that MJF, you could argue, needed to do. For the past year, one of the biggest criticisms of MJF, the character, has been the fact that he's just been doing his funny, happy-go-lucky shtick in the ring and getting away with doing just that with little to no character development. While we understand that the Adam Cole MJF stuff wasn't for everyone, personally, I thought that that was good storytelling, but it wasn't the MJF that we were used to seeing, and it wasn't the MJF that got him to the world title picture in the first place. MJF, when he won the world title in Full Gear 2022, was the world's biggest a-hole. There was no one more despicable or despised in all of AEW or professional wrestling at that point than MJF. And he used that as a launching point to make himself undeniable as the world champion and undeniable as the face of the company. And you could also make the argument that when MJF, the character, began doing the more babyface level shtick and saying that he's not just a scumbag, he is the people scumbag. When he started doing that, that was what began the fall of MJF and what eventually would go on to lose him the AEW World Championship. And he hinted towards this in his return promo back at Double or Nothing earlier this year. He talked about how in the past he was motivated by his friendship with Adam Cole. He was motivated by the fact that he had someone who he could trust, who he could confide to, someone who he could genuinely call a friend. And that motivation failed him in his biggest moment in his hometown of Long Island at AEW World's End. And ever since that day, he's been stewing. And in that same promo at Double or Nothing, he said, enough with all of the lovey-dovey stuff. MJF is going back to the original thing that motivated him, and that is hate, hate, hate. And beating down Daniel Garcia in the way that he did this past week on Dynamite cemented that. And it is precisely why I think that we are in for an absolute treat this summer, because right now you have Daniel Garcia, who will likely at some point go out for revenge on MJF, and that could even be a separate blood feud between those two, given how bad the beatdown was on Danny. And then you also have coming up Will Osprey, the match that everyone's talking about for the International Championship at All In, which is widely speculated. That is an insane main event level match that we don't even think is likely going to main event that pay-per-view because there's already such a stacked card. And it speaks to this idea of AEW restoring the feeling. And I think in many ways they were able to do that this past week. But if we want to talk about restoring the feeling, I really do believe that they have restored the feeling of what made MJF special in the first place. It wasn't the jokes, it wasn't the kangaroo kicks, it wasn't the double clotheslines. It was the fact that no matter who he was teaming with, no matter who he was talking to, you knew in the back of your mind that MJF was capable of being an absolutely evil dude. And if that beatdown this past week didn't prove it, if the fact that he was knocking phones out of fans' hands, arguing with fans, throwing trash on them didn't prove that, then I don't think anything will. To simply put it, MJF is the best heel in all of professional wrestling, already cementing himself as one of the best heels of all time. The way that he's able to get heat the amount of vitriol that he gives to the crowd and they give back is something we don't see in the modern era. And I think that's why we've gone back to this route. That fan engagement, the fact that when MJF steps in the ring, you know you're about to see something entertaining, but also something absolutely diabolical. And that is what made him best when he was coming up. And I think that's what's going to carry him into the future. But I guess we'll see.